Oh. I tried to make this answer the questions video before, but it ended up being 2 hours long and it wasn't a good video. So this time I'm taking a different approach to answering all your questions, and I'll have to sort of pick parts out of it. I mean, there's a lot of nice comments in them, but I have to sort of skip them so it won't last 2 hours. Well, I'll start from the bottom and work myself up. Michael Kennedy, thanks for your comments. Question is, should I use back button focus or zone focus or single focus if I do street photography? That's more or less what I get from this question. It really depends on the situation, which is pretty much my go-to answer for any question ever. But if you want to capture a setting or a frame, and you know exactly where you want to take the picture when somebody enters that frame, where you want your focus and where you want it to blur out, then of course I would do a back button focus, so the focus won't move automatically when I then want to take the picture. I do it a lot myself because I want to frame something and just wait for something to happen in there, and there's nothing more annoying than when that thing happens and you take the picture and then it suddenly refocuses. That's annoying. So getting rid of that, separating these two buttons, is definitely a good idea. I do that for mostly everything. But if you have moving subjects that you sort of have to get in focus and you can't really predict where they're going, then I would go back to doing a focus up here, so the camera's auto functions can help me for what it's best at. That's my answer to that question. So are you alive, Palle, from Larion Silasi? I'm sorry if I can't pronounce all these names. Some of them are really exotic. Yes, I am. Yeah, there's a lot of things going on, trying to restructure. And also this COVID crisis have been quite a punch in the face. So yeah, getting back. Okay, this is L1. What? Alberti, maybe. There's a 1 instead of an I. Why did you pick Fuji over other systems? That's quite a good question. I mean, I had other systems before. My first camera was a Nicomat. First, like, pro camera was a Nicomat. When that analog thing sort of went out the window, I went for Canon and just used that for many years until I got the X100, the first one. And the way that I was approached by people when having this tiny little camera was just a great experience. And also because from the beginning Fuji was superior on the color side. The pictures just came out much more beautiful and it was way less complicated, and it fitted my mindset the way the menus was built up. It's just very intuitive for me to use these cameras, especially this X Pro 3, which is my all-time favorite still camera. It just speaks to me, like, you know, in the analog realm, music on vinyl is very much appreciated for the way you sort of interact with it. The whole thing of pulling out this big disc and putting on a record player, and it's sort of a nice ritual. And I feel that Fujifilm is able to bring that connection to your tool into it, so you really enjoy holding this camera. I don't feel that many other manufacturers are doing so much for getting that connection. I might be wrong, but this just matches me. It's like I use Mac computers because the operating system works the way my brain works, and so do these cameras. So that's basically why. I've been there for the very beginning. Haven't been disappointed yet, so I guess that's why. What? Okay, I'll skip the comments just to make this video shorter. Just one simple question: how are you doing? I'm doing better. On my way back, some very nice people has come out and offered their help and helping me restructure. So that is absolutely incredible, and I'm really, really grateful for that, as I'm grateful for your concern. So, but I know that I don't get to make a lot of videos these days, but hopefully I'll get into a routine at some point. But I hope you have the patience to stick with me doing this. So, thank you. Thomas Høj, Danish, it sounds like. How to record ambient audio for video. He says he had a job filming an Xmas ceremony in a church for kids due to COVID-19, and the video from the XT3 and XH1 was totally fine, but audio was kind of bad. Well, let's just skip to the answer. Doing ambient sound, to me the most effective solution is having recorders, just small Zoom recorders. Zoom are really good because I think they really gave the microphone some good attention, as well as their preamps. I won't call it underrated because so many use Zoom, but I'm surprised how good it sounds. When I filmed the film in 2017 in Nepal, I used an XH2 for most of the sound, even small interviews that I made on the side. It's easy to travel with as well, so I can really recommend having that as an ambient thing. And for direct sound, I would of course record it to something else and have a sync version in the camera, so you're able to sync the whole thing up afterwards. So yeah, I would just say get an outboard recorder, and with the new floating point 30-bit recording, you don't have to worry about gain anymore, because it has sort of 2 gain stages, so you won't get a high noise floor if you have a low input. So look out for the Zoom recorders, maybe check out the new ones they make with the high bit recording. Organis MX, are the MK lenses good for run and gun? This is an MK. You have probably seen a lot of Sony shooters on the big professional cameras use these. This one is with an XF mount, and this is Samyang 24mm lens. When you use a lens that has no zoom, your feet are the zoom. And this particular lens is able to focus at this distance, which is pretty incredible. And the IQ, the quality is pretty good. I prefer these kinds of lenses to run around with, because you don't need to plan much, because you can focus so close and you can really get in close. But whereas you use a thing like this, you have focus and you have zoom and you have aperture. You've got 3 things to care about, and it's pretty long, so if you're on a small rig it gets a bit nose heavy. This one I've always used on a tripod. You know, you have to focus and zoom in, and there's a lot of choices. Let's say there's one choice more, but it's also the size. And the reason it's this big is because of the zoom, and the whole zooming is inside the housing. And the closest distance to focus you can adjust with a macro setting. But that's not really the best thing when you're running around, that you have to sort of do all these adjustments. So that's why I always use it on a tripod. But the image quality is at the next level. It's as close as you get to perfect, and in a zoom lens, which is pretty incredible. So I will not use this for run and gun. I'll use it on a tripod. If you can use it for run and gun, you get incredible quality. That's my answer to that question. Here's a question from Canada. John Morgan. John Morgan really wished that Fuji made an only stills camera, which don't have video in it. I sort of get it. I understand why you like that total separation, and you get that in the Fujifilm X-T4 because you have a movie switch. Of course, it's a great movie video camera, but you can totally look past it, because when you switch that little thing to stills, there's nothing in there, even in the menus, that indicates it's a video camera. Instead of worrying about having to find a camera that only have still functionality, maybe find one where it's not all put in the same ball, so it's totally separated. And that's where the X-T4 is a great camera for me. And also the X100V, but that's a different kind of camera with a fixed lens on it. But this is the direction where Fujifilm is moving in, where these 2 things are getting separated, but in the same camera. So instead of being annoyed with that there's a video function, choose a camera where it's only video when it's video, and where it's only stills when it's stills. So the X-T4 for now. And of course the smaller cameras like X100V, where video is sort of a thing that's just there for being there. You can film with it and pretty good, but it's not really the purpose. I have never filmed a single second of video with this. I think maybe I have just to try it out, but I don't even notice that there's a video function in this. So this one is also a great camera if you want to be super focused on just stills. Mike Arst says he has an embarrassingly mundane question. I don't think any question is embarrassing, but let's see what it is. He would say, what settings would you put in a function button where you could switch quickly from single focus to other kinds of focuses? I've actually done it with this camera. This front button here turns on eye focus. In some circumstances, people are moving about quite a bit, and sometimes you just don't want to miss the shot when you have a lot of other things to concentrate about. So I sometimes turn on the eye focus, and sometimes it doesn't want to recognize certain shapes, and then I just turn it off and put the small focus box and make it as small as possible so I can just put it straight in the eye. But that's basically what I do. I have back button focus and I have eye focus here, and when you turn on eye focus, it of course overrides what other setting you have for focus. And then you have this button right here where you switch from 3 modes: single focus, continuous focus where it just tries to follow everything it moves, and then manual where you can just use the back button focus. And for me, that's the coolest thing to do when you switch to not wanting to use the trigger button for focus. You just turn it to manual, and then you can use a back button focus. So that's how I placed my function buttons. I also put my white balance on this button here, so I can get to it really quickly, because white balance for me is a very important tool when you want to control the colors, especially up here in the north where it's this light is pretty cold. It's very blue, and sometimes I want to sort of heat it up a little bit by offsetting the white balance, and I can do that either in the matrix if you push it twice, or I could do it just by lowering the white balance with like 100 Kelvin or something. But this is direct access to the white balance. I guess whatever function you need to adjust a lot should be the functions that go into the function buttons. GFX 100S video, please. I'm actually working on that one. It'll be a little bit different this time. It is a quick tip series, but this time with guests, where we are exploring what really great photographers are doing with their GFX 100S and how they do it, and we go into detail. It's not just a generalized interview talking about approach. This is technical. I'm looking forward to make it, and I'm just waiting for setting the date where I can lure these people into this little place. So yeah, it's coming. Karaoke night, you're up next. What you singing? I'm way too shy to participate in karaoke. I was in Tokyo and was invited probably by the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen in my life, and I said no. That's how shy I am. So no, there'll be no karaoke for me. Okay. Happy New Year to you and your family, Palle. Okay, thanks. I really enjoy those comments you've sent me. It's just been overwhelming, but for this video I really have to just move. 2 hours is too much. Next one, Hiko Guitars. Palle, as a guitar builder, I shoot my own guitar photos. I'm going to invest in the XT4. What prime lens would you suggest to shoot guitar pictures? And then he talks about the size of his room. And the thing is, with products, I've been shooting a lot of product photography, and the thing is, if you want to portray a product, it should be as little distorted as possible to give the right to present it properly, because it looks really weird when you start having wide angle very close up on products, because the dimensions just take off and look weird. So in this case, because you also want to do detail shots, you want to do detail shots and a shot of the whole camera, I would definitely recommend the lens, the very lens that I use for those exact pictures, which is the 60mm. I think it's an f2.8 and also a macro lens. It's one of the first lenses that came out, and that one is great because even in a small room you can actually move away and get the right perspective, so it looks like a guitar. And for anything product, I would definitely say that either the 80 macro or the 60 macro, but the 60 is just, I think it's a very underrated lens. It's incredibly sharp. It's very, very good. I would definitely recommend that one. Okay, this is a very particular question from Sidki Arslan, and it's so focused around a very specific setting that I won't be able to actually answer it. I need more info. You know, this is I have more noise on my camera than I have on my iPhone when it's dark. And the cases with the iPhone, the Apple iPhone, is that they have an 800 people department developing that camera, and they have to circumvent all the physics because the camera is so small that they have to do it with software. So everything you see that looks good from a smartphone is due to the software and how it makes, you know, denoising. And there are different plugins for noise reduction that you can use. I rarely go above a 1600 ISO to keep noise down. I've done that for years. In modern photography and video, there's a tendency to want to make things brighter than they actually are. And when you start doing that, then you make the noise floor come up because you push the surrounding to produce light that isn't there. I know that the Sony cameras are quite capable of very dark photography, but the case is when there's very little light, there's also very little color, because there's no color to be reflected, and something that isn't there can't be captured. Even in our eyes, we have black and white sensors when things become dark, and when you open the eyes when it's dark, you don't see color. That's why I like to stay under 1600 ISO and record what I see. And if I want more light, I have to put up lights. So I get, in this case, you have to buy lights. I hope that's enough of an answer. Jean-Marc Schwartz, what kind of devices must we have to work with Adobe Premiere software? I'm not sure if this is a question about the computer itself. Okay, Jean-Marc, if you see this, could you elaborate just to be a little more clear? So I mean, the more powerful the better, right? Please elaborate, and then I'll get back to you. SJ Media, I would like to know how to properly make a closing or zoom in out camera move with manual focus. I would like to know how to properly make a closing or zoom in out camera move with manual focus. You turn the focus wheel. This question, I'm not sure. I need more detail on this to be very specific, because when people ask something, you usually answer with a very specific answer to that specific situation. But when it becomes generalized, it's really hard to come with a very specific answer. So with this in mind, and the way that this is sort of general, you just have to practice, you know, focus and move. And I mean, if you're sitting on a tricycle or something that doesn't make you jump up and down, you just need to practice your focusing. That's basically it. But please elaborate if you see this. SRS Massiva asks how to properly get the proper exposure level when you are using FLOG or hybrid log gamma. And to that I'll just say, measure the whole frame, keep the light meter at 0. 34136TS. He likes the lighting for the former video I made. This is a little bit different because it's now daylight outside. Or he'd like to see behind the scenes to understand my setup and modifiers for these videos, talking head videos. It's actually quite simple. I set them up a bit differently every time because the ambient light in here changes a bit if it's day or night. Above me here I have a 68 centimeter Falcon Eyes LED panel, and right next to me here is a smaller 48 centimeter panel, and it literally points upwards, because when I was sitting here I was just turning the lamps to see how does the light sit in the scene depending on how I twist and turn it. And that's a good thing to do. You just watch your monitor and just move it until this. I don't want to flatten out my videos completely, so I try to make it like slightly dramatic when it's these videos. Then afterwards I do the colors in color grading. It's pretty simple, but I actually have a video out there that shows through the whole thing from setting up lights to actually color grading. So I will put that link in the description and you can just watch that video. It basically takes you through the whole thing. Next up, Thomas Huber. How do you set up your camera when filming to get a good focus and a blurred background? open the aperture. f2.8 is a good sort of place to be. If you want a blurred background, you only have an f4 lens, or you set the lens for 5.6. What you have to adjust is the distance to the background. You take your subject and move away from the background. That's not always possible, but that's how you do it if you want a blurred background. Move things around, because it's distance that makes the difference in how much you want something blurred out. Unless you're using a camera with a super tiny sensor, especially with a wide angle lens. If you want really to separate, use tele lenses 50 or above, and then adjust the aperture until you have your blurred background. Melt Brunt, I'd like help with video. I shoot model aircraft and sheepdog trials. Oh, these are wow, this is fast stuff. If you want to focus track something that moves straight towards you, that's probably the hardest thing for a camera to figure out. And you have to have an incredible ability to do that, and a lot of computer power, because that is super hard. But if you place yourself just a little angled, then the focus distance becomes less quick. If you shorten a distance like this, it takes no time to shorten it, and the camera can hardly, follow along because it's very quickly. But if you add an angle, then the distance, it takes a longer time for the distance to be reduced. So the more angled you are, the easier it is to keep up with fast elements. And that's with any lens. Think about your placement on how you place yourself to fast-moving objects. Litpunk has a question. What do you say to an experienced still photographer when they want to shoot video? Basically, I say that it's two completely different things. You just use the same tool for it. Take everything you know from stills photography and apply it to your sense of aesthetics, and then practice. Because if you want to make video, usually you have an idea of what you want to do, and then just follow through it. You have to follow your vision. Use your still photography as a platform, and then work from there and practice. Daniel Da Silveira, his question is relatively simple. He's looking to buy a Samyang 8mm fisheye for his 63. If it's a toothed one, or one with clicks. I mean, if it's for video, I would always go for an unclicked one, even if I have to use it as well for stills. But an 8mm is very wide angled, and even at totally open apertures, unless you're really close to your subject, it wouldn't matter, honestly, on an 8mm if you choose T-stop or whatever. But if you have more lenses like this and want to swap them out, you would like them in the same housing, so you don't have to move your focus motor. It's easier to swap a similar sized lens on a rig than it is to swap something that's very different. So I would go for one that fits what you have and not worry so much about it being either or. But if you're very video focused, I would go for the video version and then use it for stills as well. So I hope that's enough of an answer. Joe Harrison, file data management, how do you set backup? Oh my god, that's a headache. I bought some space from some Norwegian cloud service. I chose to put all my private stuff on it. It was very expensive to buy a company service, so I bought a private service, and instead of putting all my professional stuff on it, I put all my private stuff on it. And I have a lot of private stuff, including stuff I do for free. And then they figured out I was a photographer, and then they forced me on to choose a one that is for business, even though that this was my private stuff. And the problem is that the service was also slow and really not well made. My experiences with the online cloud service backing up is okay because it takes time and it goes through the night, but when you have to get it back, it takes forever and it's slow and it's just worthless. So I have way too many hard drives. I think the best but also very expensive solution is buying a tape archiving solution, but it is very expensive, and I haven't had the means to do that, but if I had, I would do so. And you also have to remember that is archiving, and one tape can last for like 40 years. The problem is you also have to have a place to put them, and if your house burns down, you're in the same problem. So maybe the tapes could go somewhere else, but it's a headache. So I don't have the the perfect solution for it. I think the way that most people work is on hard drives. And that's because the archiving solutions not yet is at a point where they really make super much sense. So I just see people buy these incredibly huge NAS servers, and they are also slow. It takes a while to find your things and get them back. So I definitely understand why people just go with the hard drives. And until there's a better solution and things become faster, I think it's sort of, if something is really important, back it up so you have 2 or 3 drives with the same thing on it. Or go for a tape solution, and you will have to deal with the horrible interface. The software interface on tape archiving is just crap. I haven't seen anything that was good. So we're not there yet. Maybe we should go together, a bunch of people with nerd minds, and just make something that actually works. But I have no interest in that. It's just so boring. So I'm sorry, I don't have a good answer for this. Go with the drives and make multiple backups. That's my advice. I'll probably get flagged for this, but... Okay, Glenn McEnroe, what is your opinion on X-Trans versus Spire digital camera sensors? Fujifilm did what they did for a reason, to be able to produce the colors in camera that they do. So they went for the trans something potato instead of biosensors. I have no complaints about it. There was a point in time where Adobe Lightroom was not good at translating those files, but we are past that now and have been so for years. So I honestly don't worry. I don't think too much of what's inside of camera if what comes out of it is satisfying. So being like occupied with an idea of what type of sensor is in the camera, I think is a little bit sidetracking. Why not just spend that energy and put it in where you get the most of your image and make the best of what you have and not worry about whatever thing is in the camera. Robin Grivell, what kind of film simulation or configuration did you use in Nepal? I made this video in Nepal in 2017, and I used the Eterna profile for the whole film. I filmed the whole thing on Fujifilm X-H1 with a battery grip, 2 extra batteries on Eterna with a 18-55 kit lens, and it looks awesome. And that's also a testament to that it's good stuff, and the X-H1 is still an incredible good camera. So yeah, Eterna. I mean, it saves you a lot of headaches and a lot of work because it's pretty much there from the beginning. It's so easy to grade. You just need your exposure to be right on the money. So, but you need that always anyway. Clyde Caulfield. Palle, do you see a point somewhere down the line of leaving Copenhagen to shoot a video on location? Dude, man, what the hell? That's funny. In 2019, I traveled in... Okay, I might miss some in North America, England, France, Sweden, Denmark, Singapore, the Philippines, Japan, Australia. I've been in Nepal, I've been on Iceland. I get out. I do get out. So... Sorry, it's a funny question. All right. Mikkel Grom Bovin. I have to look through this. There's some very nice comments, but I have to find the question in there. Okay. He's asking how much do you use glass in front of glass, which means filters or anamorphic or other stuff. Extra lenses, things you put on your lens to get a certain look. And I've been using ND filters always, because ND filters are crucial to get the exposure right, especially for video. And because you have the slow shutter speeds. Lately I've been using a mist filter as well, a 10% mist filter, to sort of reduce the digital look a little bit. And that has worked really well. The last film I did for Fujifilm was a film about the GFX 100S with Jonas Rask, and that film was shot during the night, and even though I still use the mist filter and also an ND filter to get the colors right. So that's the glass I use on top of glass. Edmund Ryan, basic Fujifilm video setup for the stills photographer. Brain would be great, and lens preference for starting out. Okay, just set it on Eterna, the highest quality. If it's necessary to shoot 4K, then do it. If it's not, then just stick to HD. But yet again, film simulation at Eterna, you're pretty much good to go. Problem is, if you use an older camera than an X-T4, you have to adjust a bunch of settings when you switch. But if you use an X-T4, you can just have all the settings right there. Always use manual white balance, because you don't want that to swap around. You don't want any automatic stuff to adjust, because it's terrible to edit afterwards because you don't know what frame it starts to adjust itself. So you lose a lot of frames if there's a lot of automatic stuff. You can use autofocus if you're satisfied with the way it works. I think you should connect with what you actually see and just adjust things accordingly so you're satisfied with the thing you actually see. And then you're pretty much good to go. Highest quality, Eterna, get the focus right and get the exposure right. That's my best answer to a quite general question. Okay, this is basically a question of how you set up the X-T4 and what settings you have, and being super nerdy and details. Of course, I can't do this in this video. Pablo Villa, I read your comments and your question how to specifically set up the X-T4. Okay, I'll have that in mind, and I'll try to see if I can get around it at some point. Diabo, I have a question about guitar stuff. Do you record your guitar using a real amp and mic, or are you using a plug-in? If so, what amp, mic, and so forth. The neural DSP plugins sounds pretty good if you're playing. No, it's actually pretty good for most things, but it also takes up a lot of computer power. It's pretty computer power hungry. I use a Kemper. Can you see it there in the back? The blue light, under the blue light right there, is a Kemper digital device that can capture the sound of a real amp, and there's a community around it. It's 10 years old, but it's been updated with a few months in between for free, and they remind me a lot about Fujifilm, because suddenly you have new functions in your device and it sounds amazing. So I use Kemper amps for my everything, even live. That's what I use. But I also tried the neural DSP things, and they sound okay, but nothing compares to the Kemper. It's just in a league of its own, in my mind. Mr. I Got That. You may have you may have already done this video, but what are your photography settings and video settings for your X-T4? Also, what is a great lens for travel? The thing is, I never have specific settings. It's not like I have 4 settings that I use all the time. It's very much based on mood. So if I wake up one morning and I'm taking pictures for fun, I set up the colors for the mood I'm in. You know, if you have a bad day, it will probably be very dark, black and white, contrasty, and I can do that easily in the camera. I just set it up until I'm satisfied. So I don't have a setting. I don't even save it in a preset. I just get a feel of what is my mood now, and just set it up for that. And it can change later. Maybe I decide, okay, maybe I'll just switch to color now. I just don't have a specific setting. It's just like minor tweaks to what I already have, so it sort of develops, and sometimes I just start over and do something else. So I would suggest that just experiment a lot. Always just punch the settings and see what happens. And maybe I want to photograph this thing, would it work best as black and white, and then choose black and white and do it. And then afterwards, if you choose to save it as a JPEG and a RAW, you can always take the RAW and try something else. I don't save presets. Milad Panar, has your trip to Nepal changed your worldviews in any way? Every time I travel, it of course expands my view on the world, that's for sure. And the Nepal trip was the same thing. You know, every time you experience something new you haven't seen before, it's another layer on your experience. But I don't sort of have a set view on the world. I don't even know what that means. It's not like I pretend to know anything that I don't. I just have experiences, and that's just what it is. And you just experience it, and I try to capture it with a camera. It's not like I don't think about it, of course. I mean, one of the things that I took away from Nepal is that people are not the tallest people on the planet, because maybe living in the mountains, it's not beneficial to be huge. And when I come back here to Scandinavia, people are very tall, big, and that's one thing. And also what I noticed in Nepal is that people prioritize their smartphones over even floors in their houses. And I totally get that, because getting around in Nepal takes a long time. It's not easy. And people, because they're poor, have to work far from home. And to be in contact, they prioritize to be social. I totally get it. That was a nice experience, because I think that reflects on how they are as a people. Days on trails, trekking skills and guides. As much tips on buying and using teleprompters for YouTube home studios, please. That's also a very wide, broad question that is not easy to just answer. But today, You just buy the teleprompter glass that suits you well, that you can afford, and put your iPhone or an iPad under it with some software that can do your job, even sometimes with a remote. You just get something that fits your needs, and quality today is quite high. There's not a lot of bad stuff out there. Of course there's differences in really expensive stuff and less expensive stuff, and there's a reason often why things are inexpensive. But for a lot of things, and I think including this teleprompter stuff, I think it's hard to buy something that's bad. So just go with something that has got good ratings and put your iPhone up there, and then you can just take it from there. It might be a non-answer to this question. Morten Midden, can we expect any autofocus improvements from Fujifilm, especially for the eye autofocus? Yes. And there's one reason for that. Fujifilm has this thing that they say never stop, which means they are dedicated to develop and improve their products. And I've been there and I've been filming where they work, and they are hard at work improving. They put so much attention to the smallest details, even how the trigger feels. A dedicated man sitting there dedicated to that one specific thing. So yes, you can expect a lot of improvement from Fujifilm. I have no doubts. Stefan Pels, I'm really curious about the way you feel about your work. Are there times when you have doubt about your photography? How do you cope with those situations? That's a really good question, because yes, I have doubts all the time. I think I've come to a point now where I don't take it too hard if I do bad stuff or think that what I did could be better, because at some point I chose to deal with it in a way where I, instead of putting myself down every time I thought that I didn't do a good job, which was almost all the time, I chose to view those emotions as a motivation to always improve. And that made it for me. That helped a lot, because suddenly I could just use negative emotions as something positive. That basically did it for me. So instead of having bad emotions of stuff that I thought I could do better, I'm just putting it into archive, saying, okay, when you do this, do it like this instead. And then at some point I'll change it up a little bit. And then I get to a point where I say, okay, this might be the way to do it. But it's, you know how it is. You have good days, you have bad days, you just have to deal with it. But always try to put it as a learning experience. Even if you've been a professional for 20 years, still learn every day. I do that with music, I do that with photography and video. I learn all the time. And that makes it very interesting and much more fun. So that's what I'll suggest. Somebody thinks I look like Jack Black. What a surprise. Car S. That is really open. I think this is too open to me to be able to actually answer this question. Okay, I have to jump on to the next. Chandra Shekhar B. I can't pronounce it, I'm sorry, man. When can we expect Sigma release its new lenses for Fuji X mount? I don't know. I don't know Sigma. I would definitely direct this question directly to Sigma, because I have no clue. I don't know. No, I don't know anybody at Sigma. So there's another question from CM for this setup. Still, the link in the description. I have a video that's made to show all the steps. What is your top 3 favorite films? And I think it's from Scott Morgeson. I know what films had a great impact on me. Space Odyssey 2001 from Stanley Kubrick is definitely one of them. I've been talking about that movie a lot. In 1984, there was made this film called Blade Runner, which was also one of those really spectacular films that make a big difference. I don't have a top 3. That's not how my mind works. I know I appreciate a lot of different films, and that's not only 3. And I appreciate them for very different reasons. But I cannot put 3 films on top and say those are the 3 best movies. I can't do that. I like a lot of different films. I really like sci-fi a lot. I like Interstellar. I like Blade Runner, of course. Space Odyssey, all that, where you have science sort of involved and imagination of how the future could be. That's very interesting for me. I'm less into crime, because when I've seen 6 Minutes, I know already who did it. The Fifth Element is one of the films I've seen the most, I think. I like Game of Thrones. I think Game of Thrones was an incredible series. But there's so many great movies out there that anything Roger Deakins touched with his magic vision, Fargo, stuff like that, I think is incredible. But I don't have a top 3. All right. Stimula asks, what would be on your wish list for a possible future XH2? And that is a question I've already answered with numerous reports and feedback. So I can't get into that, man. How do you plan your videos? Not necessarily the tutorials. I mean, how do you approach storytelling? Do you make a storyboard? How do you make sure you have enough material in different angles and different framing? That's a very big topic. I do it differently. It depends on the situation. If you do documentary, you cannot anticipate what will happen. You can try to. And I've seen companies almost try to design their documentaries so they become untrue. And that happens a lot, especially the so-called reality TV, which is not true at all. If you see reality TV, nothing, and I mean 0% of it is reality. It's scripted mostly. And it's not scripted in a normal way. It's scripted in a way where the interviews before with the people who participate in reality TV, they try to figure out what kind of person is this, and then they get typecasted, and then they get edited as the character that the company wants. The participants are basically actors, and not rarely do they become shocked when they see the final result, and they can end up being shitstormed because of the way they were edited, and that's rather sad. So I don't know how I went down this path, but it's so different. It really depends on what you do, on how you plan it. A shot list is always great. You just, I want this and I want that, just make a list. If you want something that relates to your main story in some way, or tell something about the character in B-roll, that's a way to approach it, but there are 1,000 ways to approach it. I mean, using your surroundings as metaphors for the story is a good approach. But this is such a big topic that I can't really go into detail. But I hope this sort of made an indication of approaches. Northern Migrations asks, I would love to know how to use the metering dial on XH1. And that is the exposure metering dial. When I do video, I set it to measure the whole frame. When it stills, I always have my RAW as an extra if something goes wrong. And when I do still photography, I set the metering sometimes to center weighted, but it depends. Kind of really like the whole frame measuring. So I just turn the wheel so it measures the whole frame. Mac Jim monitor. I thought you were holding a VHS tape at first. Yeah, that was this thing that's still a bit nagging. It's a 7-inch monitor from Best View. Does it say Best View? Best View, because the V in there's sort of a little line, and yeah, whatever. It's a big thing. 7 inch is great, and it's easier to see if you're in focus. But the size, and it sucks a lot of power, so it's always a compromise. I think I actually got to the end, and I think this video is going to be horribly long as well. I'm not sure that this idea was a good idea. It's definitely a good idea for me to know what is going on among you guys and what topics I should throw myself at. I have this Patreon account that I haven't done much to. I still have some supporters there that really supports me no matter what, which totally blows my mind. But having the suggestions on that Patreon account would make some sense, because I prioritize the suggestions I get there because they pay for it. So I feel obligated to sort of follow that first. So if you want to push through some suggestions to what topics, be very elaborate and be very specific, and say, I have this very specific situation, how do I approach it specifically? Or if you have overgeneral questions, just be aware that if you ask questions like, what do you do if you want to do still photography? That's a big question. That's a whole education in itself that starts somewhere, and you can go to a school and you spend 4 years on learning that. Or do it the fast way, like here on YouTube, by picking up all kinds of different small nuggets of information. I would just say, in any way, if it's very general, you have to experiment a lot and make a lot of mistakes, and mistakes are great because you learn way more from those than you learn from anything else. And maybe do a lot of not so important jobs and do a lot of free gigs and just be open about that you're learning this. And could I film you doing this? Maybe some sports people, anything, and don't guarantee what will come out, but really throw yourself out there and try to do something that is a challenge to you. And then deal with all the errors and have all the headaches, because that's the way you learn stuff. You learn it by doing it. I have to put an end to this video. I would like to put out a thanks to all you guys for sticking around, even when I don't do a lot of videos. My personal situation is that we are figuring out a way to plan the future, and that's going on right now. The whole pandemic thing has also had quite an impact on all of us, I guess. But we are trying to figure out how to structure the future. And there will come a few videos not too long from now about the GFX 100S with a very specific interview with very specific photographers that use those. I guess that was it. See you next time.